I want you to cast your mind back to the summer of 2016.
Oh, wow, yeah.
It feels sort of like a fever dream now, doesn't it?
It really does.
I mean, socially, something just totally bizarre happened. For about 8 weeks, it felt like the entire human population just stood up and walked outside staring at their phones.
The summer of the power bank. You
Yeah.
couldn't walk down a city street without seeing people huddled in these weird little clusters trailing charging cables.
Exactly. The Pokémon GO phenomenon. Now, it is very easy to look back on that time with rose-colored glasses,
Yeah.
the closest we ever came to world peace and all that. But today, we are going to strip away the nostalgia.
Right.
Because for this deep dive, we've got a really fascinating document. It's a field study conducted right in the eye of that storm, specifically July and August 2016.
Yeah, and this isn't just a game review. We aren't looking at graphics or anything. This is a study titled Pokémon GO, étude et réflexion autour du jeu, which translates to study and reflection around the game.
And it's by Julian Alvarez and the Ludoscience team, right?
Exactly. Submitted to the HAL Open Science Archive, right at peak hype. They treated the app less like a video game and more like a sociological and geographical experiment.
I love the premise of this so much. Because they didn't just sit in the lab, they decided to take the game on a literal road trip. The marketing for the game promised that it would make you go out and explore the world. So the researchers basically said, okay, let's see which world you actually want us to explore.
Right. They chose 3 very distinct environments to test this out. A tiny rural countryside village, the high mountains of the Alps, and a dense urban city.
To see if the game actually fulfilled that promise of exploration or if it just highlighted the digital divide.
Spoiler alert, it heavily highlighted the digital divide.
Yeah.
The world of Pokemon Go turned out to be incredibly curated.
Yeah, so grab your backpack and maybe a backup battery for your phone. Let's trace their steps. We're going to look at the surprising praise of slowness. They found the total disappointment of nature hiking and some really tricky ethical dilemmas.
Let's start with the setup, because the methodology matters here. They tested the game for nearly a month, July 24th to August 20th, 2016.
Peak hype. Server crashes stampedes in Central Park.
Exactly. And to keep it scientific, they compared experiences using an iPhone 6 running iOS and a Sony Xperia running Android, which ended up revealing some huge disparities right out of the gate.
So their first stop was the countryside, a tiny village called Montresor, population about 300.
Which is a beautiful tourist destination.
Yeah.
Tons of historical architecture. If the game is really about exploring hidden gems, this place should be a gold mine.
You would think that. But when they fired up the app, the digital map didn't match the physical reality at all.
It was essentially a desert. In the entire village, they found only 5 Pokestops. Those are the landmarks where you get items, and 1 single arena for battling.
And that was actually the good scenario.
Yeah, that was the lucky village. They checked a neighboring village called Beaumont Village, about 4 kilometers away.
Let me guess. 0.
Absolute zero, no content, no gyms, and honestly, barely any mobile internet signal. This is a huge finding regarding the digital divide. If you lived in a major city, you were part of this massive global cultural event. If you lived in Beaumont Village, the game literally did not exist for you.
But even in Montresor, where they could technically play the gameplay loop, sounds, well, drudgery is the word that comes to mind. The researchers coined a term for it, the Rattata routine.
It's the perfect description. Because the game's algorithm bases the biodiversity on cell data density, the only things spawning in this village were the most common low-tier creatures. Rattata, which are literal rats, and Roucoule, which are pidgeys or turtle doves.
So imagine you're walking around this picturesque French village surrounded by centuries of history, but your screen is just showing you an infestation of digital rats.
Over and over again. And because there were only 5 stops, the whole exploration aspect completely collapsed. To keep playing, they couldn't wander off into the woods to find new things because there were no new things. Gameplay devolved into walking the exact same loop down the main street multiple times a day just to spin those 5 stops, wait for them to refresh and do it again.
It replaces exploration with sheer repetition. You're just punching the clock.
Precisely. And the researchers tried to fix it. They saw historical landmarks in the village that absolutely should have been stops. Plaques, fountains, statues. They actually took GPS coordinates to submit them to Niantic, the developer.
Oh, trying to do some community outreach to fix the map.
Try, yeah. But the submission system was closed. Niantic wasn't taking new suggestions. It highlights the centralized authoritarian control of the game. A tech company in California decides what holds cultural value in a French village.
So the rural village is a bust. You're bored catching rats and walking in circles. So naturally, the researchers did what people in the country do when they're bored. They got in the car.
And this leads to one of the most fascinating behavioral shifts in the whole study. They called it the praise of slowness.
Normally, traffic is the enemy. It causes road rage.
Right. But in Pokemon Go, you have these eggs that you incubate and hatch by walking either 2, 5, or 10 kilometers. But the game detects if you are moving too fast. If you go over about 18 kilometers per hour, it assumes you're driving and stops counting your distance.
So suddenly, getting stuck behind a slow tractor on a country road is a blessing.
They absolutely loved it. Players in cars, hopefully just the passengers, began loving traffic jams and slow zones. A red light wasn't a delay anymore. It was an opportunity to spin a stop or gain some distance for an egg.
It completely reversed human traffic psychology.
It really did.
Yeah.
But it also introduced some major safety risks. The study observed drivers intentionally slowing down in empty alleyways to creep along under that speed limit.
Oh, wow. Creeping along at 15 kilometers an hour just to trick the app.
Exactly. Or suddenly pulling over because a rare Pokemon popped up on the radar. The app eventually had to add a pop-up warning telling people not to play while driving.
Which was famously imperfect, right? I remember getting that warning while I was just jogging.
Yeah, it triggered for runners all the time. But it shows how the game's mechanics were overriding basic road safety.
Okay, so the countryside map is empty, and the roads are dangerous slow-motion zones. The researchers decide, all right, let's go to nature. Let's go to the place that should be the ultimate adventure.
The High Alps. They went to Super Devolu at an altitude of 1,500 meters.
Which, if you know the lore of Pokemon from the Game Boy games, the mountains are where the strong stuff lives. You expect to find rare rock types out there. It's the ultimate fantasy.
That is the fantasy. The reality was a frustrating nature walk with a completely empty radar.
Yeah, that is disappointing.
Very. They hiked these stunning trails with breathtaking views, but looking at the screen meant missing the view entirely and risking a twisted ankle on the rocky paths. And for what? The radar stayed completely silent.
But why, though? If the game claims to invite exploration, why does the algorithm punish you for going to actual wilderness?
This comes down to the game's architecture. Niantic built the Pokemon Go map on top of the data from their previous game Ingress.
Right, the sci-fi game.
Exactly. And Ingress data was driven by cell phone activity and user submissions from tech-savvy early adopters. Where is there high cell activity? Dense cities. Where is there zero activity? Hiking trails in the Alps.
So to the algorithm, untouched nature is just empty space.
Precisely. The algorithm favors population centers over actual wilderness.
But there is a twist here that the study points out, which I found really cynical. They did actually find Pokemon in the mountains, just not in nature.
Right, this is a huge economic implication.
Yeah.
Where did they find the biodiversity? Supermarkets.
The supermarkets.
In the commercial zones of nearby towns like Vanes or Gap. They went to a supermarket and caught 3 or 4 distinct species in just 15 minutes.
So the game says go explore the world, and then it guides you straight to a grocery store parking lot.
It is the ultimate commercialization of exploration. The source mentions rumors, which we know now became reality, of deals between Niantic and McDonald's, turning fast food joints into gyms.
Sponsored locations.
Yes. So the map is actively shaped by financial transactions. It subtly trains players to view commercial hubs as valuable destinations and actual nature as a dead zone.
So they leave the mountains a bit disillusioned, and they finally head to the major cities, Lyon and Lille, and suddenly the game works perfectly.
It's an urban safari. The contrast with the rural areas is staggering. In View, Lyon, they found up to 4 Pokestops at a single intersection.
4 at one intersection compared to 5 in an entire village.
A total flood of resources.
Okay.
They leveled up incredibly fast, catching diverse species they had never seen before. But this abundance in the city created a totally new gameplay mechanic. Battery management.
Oh man, the battery struggle. If you didn't have an external battery, you weren't playing for more than an hour.
The study argues that managing battery life actually became a core mechanic of the game itself. You had to use tactics just to survive the day, turning off the sound.
Disabling the AR camera, right?
Crucially, yes, disabling the augmented reality because it drained power so fast, which is ironic because AR was the main selling point of the game.
Exactly. See Pokemon in the real world. But everyone turned it off.
They had to. They described charging phones in the car between stops carrying backup batteries and making strategic choices, like waiting to evolve their Pokemon until they were home and plugged into the wall.
Just to save that bit of battery juice.
Right. So the tether of the charging cable really dictated how far you could explore.
Now, playing in the city also brings up the social dynamics. You have thousands of people in these shared public spaces, and the study talks about this cultural filter and what they call the zombie effect.
They share this incredible anecdote about visiting a free zoo in Lille.
A real zoo with live animals.
Yes, living, breathing animals. And the researchers realized that they, along with a massive crowd of other people, were standing there staring at their screens, hunting virtual creatures, and completely ignoring the real animals right in front of them.
Ignoring a real-life lion to catch a virtual rat.
It creates this weird competition for reality. For the players, the virtual collection had more immediate value than the physical world.
And it wasn't just zoos. The study raises some serious ethical dilemmas about playing in sacred spaces. They mention the Lion Cathedral and even reference sites like Hiroshima.
Yeah, they walked into the cathedral and felt this immediate fuzziness of the playground boundaries. Is it appropriate to hunt virtual monsters in a place of worship or memorial site?
Because the game algorithm doesn't know the difference between a cathedral and a coffee shop.
To the database, it's just a point of interest, a node. But humans have to navigate the social friction. They noted tension between players who wanted to stop every 50 meters and non-players who just wanted to walk down the street normally.
Though, to be fair, the study also pointed out some selective attention benefits. The game sometimes acted as a tour guide, highlighting obscure little detail.
It did. A small mural or a hidden fountain that human tour guides totally miss. But on the flip side, the game completely ignored major cultural landmarks, like these massive lion head sculptures on facades, simply because they weren't in the database.
It raises a big question. Who gets to decide what is culturally valuable? A historian or a game developer in San Francisco?
Exactly. If it's not a Pokestop, people walk right past it.
Okay, we have to talk about the glitches.
Yeah.
Because the study documented some exploits that are honestly hilarious, but they show how far people will go to optimize a game. Tell me about the toilet glitch.
This is pure human ingenuity. So one of the researchers was staying in a house where, specifically in the bathroom, the GPS signal was weak. It would constantly bounce between two different satellites.
Just standard GPS drift.
Right. But because of the exact location of the house, that drift made the digital avatar walk back and forth between two nearby Pokestops on the map automatically.
So the researcher could just sit on the toilet and the game thought they were walking outside.
Yes. They could farm items and hatch eggs without leaving the bathroom. It totally undermines the health and walking aspect of the game.
The ultimate lazy cheat code. And people were finding other ways to fake the walking, too.
The Roomba strategy. The source mentions players literally taping their phones to robot vacuum cleaners so they could rack up kilometers indoors while sitting on the couch.
That is amazing. It totally reminds me of the Nintendo Wii era, where people figured out you could just flick your wrist to play tennis instead of swinging your arm.
It's the exact same impulse. If a game requires physical effort, players will immediately try to engineer a way around it.
But there was another technical issue they found that wasn't funny at all. It was actually about OS inequality. iOS versus Android.
This was a really significant finding. They used a Sony Xperia for the Android testing, and the experience was objectively worse than on the iPhone 6.
How bad are we talking?
Well, there were basic UI bugs. On the iPhone, a Pokestop turns purple after you use it so you know it's cooling down. On the Android version at the time, it just stayed blue. It was super confusing.
Annoying, sure, but it doesn't sound game-breaking.
But the lure failure was. Lures are items you place on a stop to attract Pokemon for everyone in the area. The study found that Android users often couldn't see the Pokemon that were attracted by those lures.
Wait, so if I have an iPhone and I drop a lure...
I wouldn't see the Pokemon on my Android phone. We could be standing shoulder to shoulder physically together, but the Android user is completely excluded from the gameplay reward.
That is a literal class divide built right into the code.
It absolutely is. Yeah. It adds another layer to that inequality. You don't just need to live in a dense urban city to play, you also need to own the preferred hardware.
So looking at all of this, the rural white zones, the empty mountains, the battery draining the glitches, what was the ultimate verdict from the Ludoscience team?
It's a nuanced conclusion. They do acknowledge that the game did encourage walking, it got people outside, but they found that the reward versus effort ratio had to be perfectly balanced.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning, people wouldn't walk 1 kilometer uphill in the mountains for a single Pokestop, but they would happily walk in circles for hours in a city where the rewards were dense.
So the health benefits heavily privileged city dwellers.
Yes.
Yeah.
It created these massive white zones in the countryside where gameplay was essentially impossible.
The study also makes a really cool connection to an older, serious game concept, right? This wasn't the very first time someone tried this.
No, they connect it back to the work of Professor Michitaka Hirose in 2004. He created an educational tool called wallstones.
Well done.
Yeah, it was used in museums to guide kids around. They had these devices that made them walk to different exhibits to collect virtual things. Pokémon GO is basically the mass market realization of that exact educational concept.
But instead of a museum curator guiding you, it's a black box algorithm.
Exactly.
The study leaves us with a really provocative final thought about social connection. Because we all remember the crowds. Everyone said it was bringing people together.
But the study questions that. They use the phrase video game bubble.
Like we're trapped in our own little worlds.
Right. You see 50 people gathered in a park, and it looks like a community event. But the researchers observed that there's actually very little interaction. People were standing next to each other, completely silent, just staring down at their screens.
Parallel play instead of actual socializing.
Exactly. And the study asks a really crucial question. In a society where screens usually separate us, does a game like this actually bridge the gap? Or does it just let us bring our isolation out into public?
That is such a fascinating point. We're physically closer together, but mentally we're totally tunneled into the game.
It was a permanent shift, really.
And a decade later, I think we can see they were right. The Pokemon hype faded, but the concept of viewing the physical street through a digital lens stuck around.
Definitely.
And the questions this study raised about who controls the map and who gets left in the digital dark, those are huge. Something for you to mull over the next time you see someone stopped dead in the middle of the sidewalk, furiously swiping their screen.
They might be catching a monster, or they might just be caught in the algorithm.
Or they're just completely out of battery. Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive into the summer of 2016. Thanks for exploring the map with us.
Watch your step out there.
We'll catch you next time.